Good morning. We're just getting the last folks seated. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad you're here this morning. I'm Reverend Judy Nelson. I'm pastor of care here at Christ Memorial Church. As I was kind of rushing on my way down, I don't know why this came to mind, but I thought, well, let me say, I know why it came to mind. Before I went to seminary, I was a teacher in the public schools. And one of our adages was, time flies whether you're having fun or not. I thought, isn't that so true? But then my next thought was, praise God. Psalm 118:24 says, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And I thought, I think that's a much better take on time flies, whether you're having fun or not. So I'm thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that we can have fun together. I'm thankful that you have taken advantage of this opportunity to be here. And so on behalf of Evergreen Commons and Christ Memorial Church, I welcome you. We are in the presence of God because God's presence is all around us all the time. So let's give thanks. Please pray with me. God, we give you great thanks that you are the constant one. That as days and years even seem to fly by, we know that your faithfulness stands and that you care for us constantly. And so we give you great thanks for that. Lord, as we want to make each day count, we count on your presence to lead us, to guide us, to encourage us, to teach us. And so continue to teach us this day, O Lord, through the messages we will hear. Allow us to take it to heart and to know what to do with it, even as our days pass us by. But we, again, thank you for your presence, for your love. We love you, Lord, and welcome you here today. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm Suzanne Visser from Evergreen Commons, and it is so good to see all of you here today. I see a lot of faces from the last 2 weeks, the last Thursdays. If you didn't make that part of the series, Christ Memorial has recorded the other presentations, and those will be available. Sometime after today. And I'll maybe try to catch Melissa back there, and we can let you know when that's going to be available. I believe it's going to be on the website. So today we are very happy to have Hans Mulder from Cunningham Dahlman and Steve Langland from, there's 3 names, Langland Sternberg Eintema Funeral Home. So without further ado, we'll give you Hans.
Thanks. Can you hear me all right? Well, good morning, and thanks for such a great attendance. Steve and I are going to talk about not so easy topics, but ones that are hopefully very, very important. And Suzanne and I were laughing a little bit because we're in church, but it also did feel a little bit like church when everybody was sitting in the back, and we were wondering, we've got the pew or the podium up front, right? Are there anybody that's going to sit in the front? But thanks for those brave souls who came in and are sitting up front. So I'm going to talk about sort of 2 topics, estate planning, and then we're going to get into what we call elder law. Make sure my slides are advancing here. So the first topic is going to be estate planning. And it's quite often a topic that, when we're in this area, we just sort of assume people know terms, right? And we kind of jump into them. And I also find that when I talk about this topic, people are prone to say, I have a will, or I have a power of attorney, and focus on that one part of it. But what I want to kind of have as a main take-home for this part is an estate plan is a plan. Like it's something that has different parts. And, sort of an analogy might be if you and your spouse or you go on a trip, you make plans for the whole trip, right? You make a flight there, you make accommodations where you're going to stay. If you miss a part of the trip, that doesn't go so well, right? You may fly to your destination, but if you don't have the place you're staying, the Airbnb, hotel, wherever you're staying, that's going to be a real problem. So as we talk through the different parts of an estate plan, I think it's important to realize that all those parts fit into the whole. And when you don't have one, that can leave a big gap and cause some real challenges for maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a family, either the time that it takes, cost, all these things that we can hopefully make smoother and easier in that difficult situation. So the first slide I want to touch on is, you or your spouse or your family can avoid going through probate court, so a court process, by having a financial power of attorney. So it's a document that you have signed, maybe with an attorney or you've done it on your own, but it's a legal document that you're naming somebody to step into your shoes when you're not able to make your own financial decisions. So think of accessing your bank account or your investments, somebody being able to do that for you because you can't. Doctors have determined you being unable to. Very simple, but by not having that, as I describe here, what that means is someone will have to go to court and get a conservatorship. That's the mechanism we have where you could do that, but it's going to be costly. It's going to take time, and especially in those difficult moments, be stressful. So this legal document, if you have it and it's done the way you want it to, can be really important there. The other point I want to make, and this is something that I've seen more and more, and that is with this document, be mindful that laws change and even frankly how places use this document change. So how your bank sees it, how your maybe like an investment company sees it. I've had more and more over the last probably 5 years or more where documents that were a little bit older that on the face of it look totally fine. Like they look like they're great, they're going to work well, but because of either like laws changing or as documents have to get provided to these companies, lawyers like myself are looking at them, and unfortunately we have a tendency as lawyers to get into the nitty gritty, and sometimes we don't all agree on things. So having a document that is current and broad is very important to make sure there are no surprises. Second topic is a healthcare power of attorney, or we sometimes talk about it as like an advance directive. The same thing, just goes by different names. And this document, similar to a financial power of attorney, is there in part to make sure, again, spouse, loved ones don't have to go through court. They don't have to get what's called a guardianship, a process of getting somebody appointed through the court to make those medical decisions, when you're unable to. And like a financial power of attorney, a key issue is who are those people that you want to name, because of the relationship you have with them, maybe the sharing of values and faith that they have, or just generally their ability to kind of follow your wishes. Maybe they work in healthcare, they know that world. It's a very complicated one, and this is equally an important document to have, so that if you are at a point where you can't make decisions, who steps in for you, and then being able to do that without having to be tripped up and have to go to a court process that would lengthen that time when they need to make decisions. They can't do it yet, or all of a sudden it's going to cost a significant amount of money to get into court and have somebody appointed.
Is that an advance directive?
Yes, that's the same document, and that I fault ourselves, but I also the healthcare system. We've come up with different names for it, but in Michigan it is the same thing. Yeah, advanced directive or healthcare power of attorney are the same. Exactly. In that document too, we'll list your wishes as far as like end of life care and those types of things. But it is different than, maybe as you're aware, a DNR. A DNR is a separate document specific to if during your life your heart were to stop, and then the question is, should emergency folks then restart it? So it's a very specific issue that is different than, and I find frankly most people, unless they're really advanced in their disease and illness, they're not doing a DNR because you don't want somebody just to not put the paddles on you and not try to start your heart if something just very unexpected happens, but you're otherwise healthy. So healthcare power of attorney or advanced directive is really the key to allowing somebody to step in and do that based on your wishes, but also without the court involved. Exactly, yeah. What I'll do, if that's right, is I'll answer your question, and then I think from a format standpoint, we're ideally, I love the conversation. That's why we usually do seminars this way. But I think after yours, if that's right, we can take questions at the end. But your question is a really helpful one of like, is that signed at the hospital? Quite often it is, because if someone goes for a procedure, the hospital is asking you, do you have a patient advocate? Do you have an advanced directive? If you've signed it separately, like maybe you've had a lawyer draft it, you shouldn't sign a new one, because that new one would be replacing the one before. But they are the same thing. It's just that for someone who doesn't have it, it's a great way to get it in place. But if you've already done it, it's not best to sign a new one, because then it could be kind of in conflict or questionable about the others. But great questions. And sir, if that's right, what I'll do, because I think they might be towards the end too, kind of coming around with a microphone so people can hear the question. So I'll don't mean to disregard your question, but what I'll do is we'll get through kind of our part and then make sure that Steve and I have got time for questions at the end. Next, I want to mention, a will, as many of you know, right? That's a document that we traditionally think of as like what happens when we pass, right? Who takes care of things, that being called the executor or maybe the personal representative, and then who does it go to? So that's a very important document to make sure your wishes are fulfilled with, who do those assets, get distributed to when you're passing? Now, what is a little bit surprising is that when you have a will, that doesn't mean, or may for sure mean, that your assets when you pass away, so your home, bank accounts, those assets could very well go through probate court, because with just a will, you've kept them in your name, like you or your spouse still own them, but when you pass, there's no ability legally for that child or family member to step in without going through court or through probate. So what I've noted here is it's definitely not for everybody. It would be best to have a lawyer or an attorney advise you on, right, what's the best plan. But for many people, especially folks who have a home, the ability to avoid court, like not have to go through a court process, oftentimes is best by using a trust. That's a lot we could say about that, but in the kind of the time we have, I just wanted to mention that's something to keep in mind as far as if you have a desire to avoid probate during life, but also at death, a trust could be important way, to do that. And then that document says who steps into that process, like who handles it when I pass away, who sells the home, and then how do assets get divided. The last slide I've got on this topic of like estate planning is for folks who I realize that estate planning it's a process, but as with all things, there's an expense and a cost associated with it. And the woman who asked that question about like with that healthcare power of attorney or advance directive, so there may be ways for folks who really, resources are a challenge, right? And you're trying to do this in a way that's least costly. If you're not in a position to, get something done through a lawyer, you might be able to, through a hospital, right? They have those powers of attorney that you could sign. You might be able to avail yourself of like Legal Aid of West Michigan. So they're organizations that I believe Evergreen has a great, I know they've got a great resource center, but they can perhaps connect you with some folks to see if there's a way of doing that in a very inexpensive or maybe even free way. The second and last topic I want to touch on is elder law. This is an area, again, that we kind of use these terms, but what do we really speak to? This is really kind of the area that we talk about when people have or need more medical care or more care in their life. A lot of times it's our spouse, our family who's providing that, and that may be part of it. But then as that becomes more challenging, right, where spouse and family are not able to do it all, or we can't provide that care in our own home, and we're doing it in other places. What does that look like from a legal standpoint, and so forth? So I've listed up here this obviously will change over time. Unfortunately, is that costs for different places when you can't live at home, right, can be very, very expensive, as you can see here from the ranges. And having the resources to do that, some folks do, and some folks have the ability to do that for a long period of time. Many people do not. And so what we're going to talk about, just at kind of a very general level, would be kind of what that may look like to what quite often Medicaid is the program that may be an option for folks who perhaps in their own home, maybe sort of some kind of adult daycare type services, but then in particular, when it comes to the expensive care like assisted living or a nursing home, is a program called Medicaid available to help pay for this care and lessen the effect on of your assets and diminishing them so that you have those to live on, or a spouse does. So not surprisingly, or as you may know, Medicaid being a program that is not available to all people. It's available based on both medical need, but unfortunately, most complicatedly, it's also based on a financial need. So there's there are various rules around what assets you can have, and then what income is sufficient to be able to qualify. And there's a lot that could be said about that. Unfortunately, we don't have time today to kind of get into kind of the nuances of it. But realizing that that there's there are financial rules beyond your medical need. If you find yourself in assisted living or a nursing home, there are financial rules that that you have to follow. And the good news, though, is that there are the rules that are set up. At least it provides kind of a beginning point of their assets that we think of as exempt. Like the most traditional one would be like our home, right? Our home is something that, fortunately, the rules regard as like you can keep that. If you or your spouse had to go to a home with very few exceptions, a home's going to be a kind of protected, right? It's exempt in that way. A vehicle is as well. Relevant to what Steve, I don't think he's maybe going to get too much into that, but when you do good planning with somebody like Steve and Langland, that also, when you prepay it, that money you've set aside is also exempt and protected. So the Medicaid program wants to encourage people to do helpful things for you and your family, and then also to be able to kind of protect certain assets. And I would also say the rules, not surprisingly, are different for if there's a married couple, like husband and wife, and in particular one spouse needs care, but the other lives independently, on how much you can keep, what the rules are. Different, as you'd imagine, for a person who's single, whether they're widow or widower, or they never married. Like a single person, the rules are different because there's not that spouse to have to provide for. And again, a lot that could be otherwise said about this, but what I just want to emphasize is that whether with Evergreen or a lawyer, if you find yourself in a position like that where your parent, whether a spouse, is in need of care like that, I would encourage you to seek out some resource to help evaluate, okay, what are these rules? How do they apply to me? But then also, are there ways to sort of protect or preserve what you have in addition to what those rules are? I've sadly seen over my 25 years folks who experience these issues, and not surprisingly late in life, 80s, 90s, but I've also had many clients who are in their 50s and 60s, and it breaks your heart to see people go through it at any stage of life. But having the ability, especially in a situation with a spouse where there's a lot of concern and anxiety about what they're going to have to be able to live on. So just know that there are important options to be able to kind of protect and preserve what you have. It's complicated, but there are, in almost every case, options to consider. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and then I think at the very end, again, don't mean to push off questions, but I think that's when we'll get back into questions that you have.
Yeah, no, questions I find, especially with what I'm talking about, is going to take up a lot more of the time than me speaking. I've already had some people prior to this ask me questions in the lobby, so I'm not going to go on too terrible long. I find that to be the best. So there's different ideas, and people have different ideas about pre-planning or their wishes for their funeral service. We've had people walk in with a notepad or a legal pad and say, this is what my dad wanted upon dad already passing. Some people will come in and meet with us and write down all their wishes. We keep that on a file. Some people plan their funeral almost to the T as far as refreshments afterwards, flowers and all that, and pre-fund it too. So to say you pre-plan doesn't mean you have to pre-fund. To talk a little bit, what Hans just hit on was it's called a Medicaid spend down, where someone is in a care facility and they are, that can quickly eat through a life savings. You or whoever it is would be advised, hey, you should go and prepay your funeral. And then the money is set aside and it's signed as an irrevocable funeral contract. And that means that money can only be used for you or your loved one's funeral. The money is not refundable. If there is money set aside that is not used for the funeral service, that money can be used to start a prepaid contract for another family member, or the money can be used, I can take that money that's left over and donate it upon the family's behalf to a nonprofit, such as like Hospice of Holland or the person's church, things like that. But that money cannot be refunded to the family because of the laws of how it's set up with the whole Medicaid plan. People quite often ask about the money that's pre-funded, what happens to it? We cannot keep the money ourselves at the funeral home in our bank account. It is given to a third party, and that money is put into one of two things, a life insurance policy or a trust, and that's where the money remains until you either pass away or you say, you know what, we want the money back. If you want the money back, there's a penalty for withdrawing it and not using it for a funeral. But the money, if it's for your funeral service, it stays there until you're passing, your loved one's passing, and then we use that money to cover the cost for today's expenses as what they are. People often ask about, what happens to those expenses. Of course, most everything is going up these days, and so the money that's set aside, we guarantee our services and the merchandise that's selected it will be provided to you at no additional cost. Merchandise means casket and vault, urns, things like that. Our services mean what our service fee is for providing the types of services you select, whether that's cremation services or burial services, we provide that. You can set aside money for other expenses like cemetery fees, obituary notices, which there's an awful lot of people not doing obituaries anymore because not many people get the newspaper, so that's not a big thing anymore, but still we run plenty of obituaries in the newspaper for you. So that money then that is set aside in the life insurance policy or the trust earns interest over the years. So if, let's say for an even number, the cemetery expenses is $1,000 today when you pay it, and upon your passing, it goes up to $1,500. We can figure out what that $1,000 is earned over the amount of time the money was set aside, and then if whatever the balance is of what it earned to what today's cost is, then your family will be billed that. So that's how the prepaid funds work with that. To talk a little bit more about if you aren't going to meet with us about planning your service and you write your wishes down, make sure your family knows where that is. Kind of almost a funny but sad story is my brother Mike, a friend of his dad passed away, and came in for funeral arrangements like, we know Dad had written down, but we can't find it. So the family sat down, planned the funeral service to the best of what they thought their father wanted. 2 days after the funeral, my brother Mike's buddy walks in the funeral home, meets with Mike, puts it down on the desk, and says, found what my dad wanted. It was locked in a safe. Didn't tell anyone it was there, but they were going through the safe. So if you decide that you want to write stuff down and keep it at home, let your family know this is what I want, this is where it's at. If you meet with us and you say, hey, we've got a plan with you, we want to do this, tell your family, hey, everything's set up at Langland Sternberg Funeral Home or Eintema Funeral Home or whichever funeral home you decide to use. Let them know, because it is not uncommon that at 9 o'clock at night we get phone calls from someone saying, my dad just passed away. He told us there's pre-arrangements. Is your funeral home the one he selected? And it's unfortunate that they have to do that, but yes, it does happen. So communicating with your family what your wishes are, what funeral home is a good thing to do. So as far as some of the questions that Suzanne has on the screen here, so they're pulled off my website. How much does a funeral cost? Our service fee is set. We have 3 different levels of services that we provide for families. The least expensive option is $3,050. What that includes is a direct burial or a cremation without any ceremony for either one of those. That's $3,050. The next service level we provide would be a visitation, memorial service without a body present, whether that the deceased is either cremated without being at the visitation or the service, or the deceased is buried without being the cremation and service. So that's $4,795. Additional fees to that, to both of these actually, would be cremation costs, what the crematory charges, and the cemetery fees, death certificates, things like that. So those are always going to go along with what our fees are. So and then the next is what would be our highest level of service, and that would be what I would refer to as a traditional funeral, where the body is there for the visitation and the funeral service. The use of all of our motor vehicle equipment, the use of our facilities for the visitation, for the funeral service, or coordinating things at your church for your funeral service. Also, it includes all of this service fee and the one for $47.95 include all of, when I say paper products, I mean memorial folders, thank you notes, register book, video tribute for that if you wanted us to make a video of pictures of in music, display boards, And then all of our work for coordinating things for the Visitation Memorial Service, filing of the death certificate, which we coordinate that through the doctor to sign your death certificate and get that all squared away with that. Also, part of what we do, regardless of the level of service, is we notify Social Security of the passing. As we file the death certificate with the state of Michigan, it notifies the Social Security of your passing, of your family one's passing. That's the only notification we can do. If anyone else needs to be notified, that has to come from the family to for life insurance, things like that. That has to come from you. They're not going to talk to us. And then additional to, the 6350 package I talked about would be casket, vault, cemetery fees, flowers on a casket, honorariums for pastors, musicians, custodians, things like that if it's at a church, sound technicians, guys like EV, or EJ, they need to get paid for their services or the time, right? And so those are all things. So what a funeral costs, what I would say for a traditional type funeral service with a body present, casket, vault, average cost is a range, I would say, because you got different caskets and vaults that are available. You got cemetery fees that can range from as little as $600-700 to there's certain cemeteries we work with that it can be. I just had one recently. It was $2,900 just for the burial alone, not including a stone or a vault or anything. The vault and everything was additional. So cemetery or funeral services, I would say, can range from say $11,500 to $17,000, depending on casket, vault. And also what we include in that for the total number is the food for after the service. We're kind of in a niche here in West Michigan that isn't anywhere else in the country, that we as funeral homes help families with their funeral luncheon afterwards. We talk to you about what you want, whether it's at the funeral home or the church. We order it and get it there and do that. Nowhere else in the country that I've ever talked to do funeral homes do that. It goes to the family, it goes to the church, and that can easily add up to $1,000 easily for quote unquote just like ham and turkey buns, potato salad, chips, cookies, pies from Russ's or whatever you want, but $1,000 goes pretty quick for that. So that's additional to it too, and we help you with that. So kind of a broad stroke there of what funerals cost. I already talked about what's included in a traditional funeral service. What do I do right after someone passes away? If someone is, under hospice care, you need to call the hospice nurse if the hospice nurse isn't there. If it's at a care facility, the care facility, they'll be knowing what's going on. They'll call us or whatever funeral home you designate, and they'll make contact with you and let us know, and we'll head into wherever the place of death is. If it's a unexpected death, where if someone's mowing the grass and they go down and it happens suddenly, you need to call 911. The medical examiner needs to get there. They need to investigate it. We can't be called until after it's done. If there were some underlying conditions, like the person had some pretty severe health issues, they will probably just call us and we'll go to the scene. If it was a relatively healthy person and they're young enough, they'll take to the medical examiner's office and do an autopsy, which then we coordinate with the medical examiner's office to take them into our care and get them back to the funeral home and find out from whatever family members are what their wishes are and doing that. And can we delay burial cremation until relatives arrive? Yes, we certainly can. Probably in the last 20 years, I've seen so much more of that than what we had prior, because people don't want to inconvenience their family by saying, hey, we're having grandma's funeral on Thursday. And, well, we can't make it. We've got other things. Saturday's the big day. We joke we do funerals 2 days a week, Saturday and Saturday. I've got usually more people at work on Saturday than any other day of the week. This week, Saturday, I've got 4 of them, 4 services. The couple Saturdays ago, we had 3. I mean, it's 2 or 3 is about average what we do for Saturday. Cremation can be a little sticky for delaying it, because the state of Michigan does have a law that within 48 hours of a person's passing, they need to be one of 3 things: cremated, buried, or embalmed. So, for someone, if they want to see their loved one prior to cremation and they don't want to do embalming, it'd be good to get them in sooner than later. We can do our embalming, our preparation work, and delay that. not indefinitely, but usually, a week to 10 days is what I would recommend. You really don't want to have, just that hanging over your head of knowing that it's going to happen. So that's what we have for that. Who has the legal right to make decisions after that? That's a great question. The legal next of kin is always going to be the person to default to, whether it's a spouse or adult children, adult grandchildren, brothers, sisters. There's a pecking order of who gets to make decisions. The state of Michigan passed, our Michigan Funeral Directors Association has lobbyists in Lansing, and we worked with, the Michigan Funeral Directors Association worked with lobbyists to get this passed. I think it was 2 years ago. Maybe the funeral directive? Yeah, I think it's about that. That long ago? Wow. Time flies. Pre-COVID. So what it's called is, and I want to make a reference, so I'm just going to pull it up here, but I can't see it. Funeral representative designation. So what that is now you can actually designate someone other than your legal next of kin to take care of your funeral arrangements. If you don't have a family, if you have a very small family, if you have a estranged family that, maybe your wife or your husband passed away, you have children, but you don't get along, you don't talk, you can go and designate a neighbor, a friend, someone to take care of your funeral arrangements. The biggest problem that we had was for cremation services, if there's not a spouse, there's estranged children trying to find children to sign, and you need a simple majority. So if you have 3 kids, you only need 2. We were running into, and everybody in basically the country is running into, people won't sign, or you can't find them, or it used to be 10, 12 years ago, you didn't need a simple majority, you needed everybody. So we're tracking down people in prison, truck drivers on the road, and people on cruise ships. Fortunately, the state of Michigan, we got that changed to a simple majority. But the funeral representative form is very good if you have a small family, if you need someone to take care of your arrangements upon your passing. We have them at the funeral home. I know hospitals have them, that when you're being admitted, and there's a chance, you can sign it while you're at the hospital. You need it notarized, or you need it signed by 2 witnesses. So it's very simple to do. All you do is fill out, give your name, sign up who you want to do to be that person, and that is how you make that happen. And what if families do not agree about arrangements? Had this last year, had one of the worst ones I've ever had as far as a family that doesn't agree about arrangements. And this would have been not had this problem if this family had filled out that form. There was 3 siblings. The son died. Had 2 sisters that were living. The one sister hated the other sister didn't know why she hated her. So the gentleman had told his sisters, or the sister that he got along with, yep, if something happens to me, cremate me. No services. He was not married, had no children, just was a very simple man. The sister who was estranged wouldn't sign. The sister who was there, she couldn't move forward on the cremation. So the option that we had a burial service for this gentleman, which added to the expenses, which cost, by the time you buy a grave, you'd have the grave dug, you buy a casket, you buy a vault, that adds several $1,000s to the bill. But we can do that without having both sisters sign, because if she said, I want to see my brother, we can do that. After someone's cremated, you can't uncremate someone. So that's the funeral arrangements can be very difficult with that. Another thing to talk about too is be careful what you say to your family and friends about your final wishes. I had arrangements the guy said, hey, just have a visitation for me. You don't need a funeral service. And he was sick. He was under hospice care. He passed away, and I was meeting with family, and they said, yep, Dad just wants a visitation, and then we're going to have a burial service, not a funeral. But we kind of want a funeral, but he didn't want that. And I said, well, the funeral is not for your dad. The funeral is for you, his widow, his children. And I said, have it. Don't be regretting this next week or 2 weeks from now that you didn't have a service for your dad. because you're not going to offend him because your dad doesn't care anymore whether you do or not. No disrespect to your father, but if it's important to have a service, and have a service. And they're like, man, if we really did that, that would be great. You know, our friends, dad's coworkers could come and we could have that, and they did. And they're like, I'm so glad we did that versus not doing it. So yes, once again, I would say to your family, this is what I want, but ultimately do what's best for you. If you decide you want this, do it. It'll be fine. When do I pre-plan, prepay? We've had people come in the day after they retired. Husband and wife retired yesterday, set an appointment, came in, they pre-planned, they prepaid. Some people do it, get a point in life that maybe your health is declining, you want to do it. Also, Hans talked about once you're on Medicaid, the Medicaid spend down, get a lot of people come in, and because you're down to, the money's running out, you can prepay your money, prepay your service, and have that money locked away so that it can't be used for your health care. What paperwork is needed? Social Security number is required. We need to fill that out on the paperwork. So upon your passing, we notify Social Security. If you're a veteran, honorably discharged, DD 214 is good for us to keep on file, because a lot of times people, if they don't pre-plan, they can't find it, or they are scrambling to get it. If you own cemetery plots, bring in your paperwork for that. We can keep that on file. Now, don't need a ton of paperwork for that. If you don't have resources for your funeral, if you wanted to prepay, there's payment plans. So not everyone has the money sitting around to write a check for their funeral. We can do 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year payment plans, and that it's payment through the life insurance policy. And the beauty of that with putting the money in the life insurance plan is after you pay 1 year's worth of premiums and you pass away, 50% of your funeral is paid for. If you plan a $12,000 funeral and you pay 1 year on it, like I said, 50%. After the second year and you pass away, it's fully funded. So it's a good product to have to put your money and make the payments for that. And veterans benefits or insurance, yes, we sure can help with that. For veterans benefits, for like military honors, we coordinate and make all that happen. As far as more of the veterans benefits through the VA, if you were receiving them or there's a death benefit, that's something you all will have to do. And then insurance, we can also help if there's a life insurance policy to get that. If you want to pay through your life insurance, we have a funeral assignment form. So if you have a policy that's greater than the funeral expenses, they'll cut you a check for over and above what the funeral expenses are. They'll mail us a check for the cost of the funeral. And that's the end of my questions here. Why don't we go ahead and take questions? Why don't we get Hans up here, and you guys can hit us both up for questions and take care of that. Looks like we got just over 15 minutes until our time is up. So I'll try and be concise on my answers, and hopefully Hans, you will too, right?
That's right.
Okay, so we'll start in the back here with the one for Hans.
All right, so my father had a question about the DNR. Is that something that's part of an advanced directive, or is that something that's separate?
It is a separate legal document. So
A separate document.
It's one that you traditionally see through a hospital or a medical provider. And the reason being is that a physician or a medical professional needs to sign off and consent to it. So unlike a advanced directive where the person signs, and then, as Steve was kind of alluding to, a lot of these documents have some requirements of like witnesses. The requirement of the DNR is the physician is consenting to it. So it's a separate document, typically a one-page document that you fill it out, physician signs, and then you keep it on file.
And
Closer, can you hear? There you go. Is that a single document, or might someone have multiple DNRs across different doctors, or maybe as different procedures happen?
It should just be one single document,
Okay.
because it just relates to that specific issue of, if your heart stops,
Sure.
should it be revived? So there wouldn't be a need, or shouldn't be a need to have multiple ones and, maybe have conflict.
I would to talk about that too, is have a DNR available. I've seen people put on the refrigerator. I've had people come in and talk to me, they worked my dad for however long, and I'm telling them we have a DNR, but we couldn't produce it. And so, yeah, don't lock them in your safe. Have them accessible.
So then this is a document that you have then yourself. It's not, you have it signed or witnessed by a doctor or a physician, but then you keep it yourself.
I've seen, it's an 8.5 by 11.
okay.
So just
I think
a
I've
piece of paper. I've seen them, like I said, I've seen them in houses on a magnet on the refrigerator.
And you can acquire those documents on the website for state of Michigan. So there's a Michigan Do Not Resuscitate Procedures Code, and it's a one-pager that you would just take to the physician and have them sign, and then keep it, like the gentleman said, on yourself, or give it to those providers that you know might institute those procedures for you. And we can help you with that through our resource office if you would like. We have another question here. Is it for Steve or Hans? For Steve.
If we prepaid with you, for example, and a spouse died and the remaining spouse moved to be with children, say an hour away, but still within Michigan, how does that work?
Yeah, that does happen. If it's close enough, we would try to get to the place of death and take you into our care there, but it also can happen that it's too far away and we might have too much going on today. I would contract with the funeral home in that town and say, hey, you know, this lady passed away at this care facility or her son's house. Can you take them into our care, and we will come and get them later this afternoon, tonight, or tomorrow morning. So it is fairly common that happens, and it works fairly well. Now, another question to piggyback that is some people then will move to, let's say they're moving out of state to Denver or something to live with their children, and the money is with us. That money is transferable to your funeral home in Denver if you choose that's where you want to have your services. So what would be best is you just keep the money right where we have it upon your passing. We just there's a form to fill out. We contact the insurance company, say, hey, send this money to XYZ Funeral Home in Denver, Colorado for their mother's funeral expenses. Looks like I've got a question over there back in the corner, Suzanne.
I guess the first two sessions, maybe we talked about it. I have friends who talk about some type of legal documents called a bird, something.
Ladybird deed? That's him, not me.
Yeah, that has become a lot more common of a document, but also I think as it's become common, there are questions about it. So it's a type of deed. So a lot of times people say Ladybird Trust, but it actually is a deed and it relates to your home. And the main purpose that it comes up would be to make sure your house avoids probate court. So it avoids court by having a beneficiary on the deed. So in other words, like, who does the house go to at your passing? And the reason why it came about was when we talked about sort of elder law and Medicaid, somebody can't qualify for Medicaid if their home is in a trust. So the workaround for that became, let's not have it in the trust name, but let's have the trust as the beneficiary. So it goes to the trust at death, but if it's in the person's name or maybe a couple's name during life, if they need Medicaid, the house is not counted. It's exempt. It is a separate issue, but very much related. So when you work with an estate planning lawyer or somebody doing elder law, it's important to have them advise you on what's the best way to own your home. Is a Ladybird deed best and so forth. So a lawyer would almost always do that, and it's related to your trust. For single people, like people who are widow or widowers, absolutely. If you're a married couple, sometimes it's ironically best to have it in your trust and do the Ladybird deed later. So that's something that's best to seek advice from your estate planning lawyer on.
Get the mic to you.
Okay, so I really had two things. The one thing is for Medicaid spend down, you can title your assets in a certain way to protect those. But there still is a 5-year look back on that. But the question I really had with regards to funerals and visitations, what is the most economical place to have a visitation, in the funeral home or in the church?
Sure, good question. Certainly, visitations at churches has become more common in the last several years. As far as economics, there is no difference for us if we provide a visitation at a church or at our funeral home. The only issue with churches is, and I'll take this church for example, which door do you go to? Okay, I mean you got. What letter is this door? Like G or H or something like that? And then you got all the way going over there to letter A. And for services here, we do say use doors D and E, which is that, whatever door it is. That's the only thing is, how do we get there? Nobody likes hitting a locked door, as he hit this morning. This door was locked, it wasn't open yet. And that's the only issue is that it's not always convenient, or, so yeah, it's the same price, and actually it's easier for us to provide a visitation at my funeral home. I have everything there. If I have to do it here, I got to take everything here. So whatever's best for your family, for your circumstances, we want to provide that. That answer it? No additional charge. Yes, so it's this, whether I'm using here at the church or using my funeral home for visitation, it's our same. That's under our service fee.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Darla.
I've got a question. With my husband's, just had a family member pass away recently, and what we found out was at the cemetery plot, what's left is there's only room now for 2 more. Should be Terry and myself, but the big question, and actually shock to us, is there's not room for 2 bodies.
Oh.
And I'm wondering, do you suggest that we get familiar with the cemetery plot? So to help us determine, because now is one of us going to be cremated and the other body buried? Can you advise, because so now it's like, oh gosh, if Terry or I would have passed, then I found that out, or our kids find it out, and you're in the middle of that person passing. So now at least we've got the opportunity to, okay, do we want to purchase somewhere else?
Yep, no, it is good. I mean, it's one of those things you don't think about until usually it happens. A funeral service like this, I've run across this where after someone passes, I call the cemetery and say, hey, we need to, and it may be an old family plot that maybe the person that passed away, his dad or his grandfather bought a plot of 8 or 10 or 12 graves, and they always assume there was a grave for the deceased and their spouse, and we get there and there's only one left, or the lots have never been designated as to whom it is. And if it is a generation, like if the deceased grandfather passed away and you want those lots, but you need to go to all the descendants of the original person that passed, the original person that purchased it, have them sign off allowing Terry and Darla to have their burial there, it's a lot of rigmarole. Working at it ahead of time to figure out what you want, where you want to be is helpful. But also, if you don't have plots, if there's not a family plot, for me to help you get a plot at Pilgrim Home Cemetery or Zeeland Cemetery is very easy. I just set an appointment for you with the cemetery, you go and select your graves and purchase them. But the thinking you have a plot and then knowing you're not going to have that plot after your loved one passes away is not an easy thing to have to deal with on top of everything else. So if you think you got a family plot, I'd recommend you research it, make sure there is a spot, because I'm sure what happened when she's saying there's not room for 2 bodies, when they initially started burying people in there, they didn't have it measured out right. Graves are supposed to be 4 feet by 8 feet. Someone probably got moved over into the next grave. The other one maybe got moved over into that grave, and next thing you know, you got room for 1.5 vaults when you need room for 2, and that's not right. That's not going to work. So, good question, Darla. You want to, yeah. Suzanne will get you the microphone here.
On that issue, I thought you could have one casket and one ash.
Cremation?
burn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or two cremations in one plot.
You sure can. You sure can. Most cemeteries allow up to four sets of cremated remains to be interred in one grave. Certain cemeteries, it's two. I don't know of a cemetery plot that wouldn't allow a traditional type burial, full body burial, and a cremation burial on top of that. So that is very common that people do that.
One more question. I've just been through this, and we had to go and redo our trust. And our lawyer said, instead of my son being a POA, he made him a trust of the trustee. Can you explain the difference between?
Yeah, great question. So there's different terminology. The power of attorney is someone that while you're living, they handle assets that are in your name. So that's most commonly like an IRA. It may include like a bank account that you still have your name, you haven't put it into the trust. So during life, the power of attorney steps in to handle assets just that you own or you and a spouse own. If you were to title assets in a trust, like go to the bank and put the trust as owner of that account, or you've got maybe like your home in a trust, it's the trustee then, so likely yourself, and then as your son who's the successor, he steps in. Think of it as he's just kind of wearing a different hat, if you will. It's almost always the same person, but it's a different legal role and responsibility.
And to piggyback that, power of attorney ends at death. Enough people say, well, I'm power of attorney when they're meeting with me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry that ended, but I'm power of attorney. I said that ended. You can only be power of attorney for a living person. You can't be for a person that has passed away.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, are there any last minute, maybe one more question? Sure.
What is the cost difference between cremation and being embalmed?
Okay, so if I was to provide a traditional type service with embalming and body present, we were at $6,350. If I was to provide those exact same services without the body present at the visitation or service and no embalming, it's $4,795. Now I try not to do math in my head, but Hans, you're smarter than me. Do you get that number? $1,400, $1,500?
$1,600.
16. Thank you. Yeah. I don't want to show off my lack of intellect here, but so that's with the packages here. So if that includes our availability. All those fees include us. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. We are available. So that's the big difference there as far as between the two packages is the care of the deceased after their passing with embalming, dressing, and getting them all ready. Is that accurate? Does that answer your question okay? Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I think we have a few moments at the end here for all of us to answer questions. And of course, on behalf of Christ Memorial, Evergreen Commons, there's a lot here. Anchor In-Home Care, Cunningham Dahlman, and Langland Sternberg, thank you so much for joining us with us for this series. And we hope that we can answer any questions you may have that are remaining.